Hello everyone and welcome to another brand new video. In this video, I'm just being a sock, so don't mind that, but right now we actually have the PlayStation 5 specs. They've actually kind of come out. We've had a lot of people going and talking about it, discussing it, and at the end of the day, we've learned a lot about what's going to be happening ideally at the end of this year. But right now, we haven't had anyone kind of do a super big deep dive into the specs, what they kind of mean, besides like the kind of rough idea of like, oh, GPU is better, CPU is a little bit worse, whatever it might be. But we have a really kind of cool thing over here from Digital Foundry, who's pretty well known in the whole video game sphere, discussing on how specs are, what's going to be going on with the PlayStation 5, and it's just a really big in-depth analysis when it comes to PlayStation 5 Pro. So every day I want to go talk to you guys about this because the PlayStation 5 has been on the very, well, news topic central for the week, and at the same time, I am a little bit excited for it in the very near future. So if you guys will sit back, relax, and enjoy, make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on. We have the Samsung link down below. You guys want to go check out the both giveaway and also pre-order bonus for them, #ad, Twitter and Twitch stream, and give me your thoughts and comments and everything all down below. Now, as you guys can probably go and tell by me being a sock, once again, I could probably explain. But when it comes to this stuff, basically, we've learned a lot about the PlayStation 5 Pro, where when it comes to the specs, it seems like the GPU is a little bit better, the CPU is about the same, and there's some cool technology with the PSSR, which I try to make a video on too as well, so maybe do a little bit more of an in-depth if you guys would ever want. But basically, there's cool specs and updates. No one knows the price yet, but it's intriguing. But there's a lot more information coming over here. And once again, back to normal. Hello. So right now, we're actually seeing this cool video game charts that we had a chance to highlight and get the big picture when it comes to the PlayStation 5 Pro, where we have the specs, they're all analyzed, we have a chance to do a deep dive on this, and I like it. Saying there have been recent reports that they have leaked the specifications for the yet-to-be-announced PlayStation 5 Pro. The Digital Foundry, in its own analysis, has said the PS5 Pro is real and dives into what the improved specs of the mid-generation console will mean for games. The analysis says more and more games on the current generation consoles, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S, which actually might have another big video on the Xbox later on throughout today, so be on the lookout for that, are CPU limited, and with the PS5 Pro having the same CPU with the ability to run at a 10% higher clock speed at 3.85 gigahertz, likely means CPU limited games that run at 30 FPS will not be able to be ran at 60 FPS, which is actually a big topic, where it seems like the CPU is kind of being throttled. Now, they still want to make sure the price point's very, competitive. You want to make sure the GPU itself is good. That's probably the biggest and, best component. But the CPU, as a PC guy, the GPU is probably number one, CPU is probably number two, and then everything else is probably number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the fact that the CPU is basically not allowing a lot of games to grow that may need CPUs, and there are a lot of games out there that require CPU, and just in general. Now, the GPU is nice for graphics, the CPU is more for the processing. There's a little mixture of kind of both between the two, but it's kind of the big rough idea. So think a game like, say, Minecraft. Minecraft is very much more CPU-based because it's procedurally generating and rendering stuff. It's not really too much on the graphics. It's more about the functions, animations, the processing of brand new mobs being spawned in, keeping and maintaining the world you develop. And it's kind of the same thing for MMO type style games or things I don't know, just more of a bigger game. Think of a Skyrim, think maybe even a Last of Us, etc. Where there's just a lot of stuff going on in the game. You need both. And it seems like they're kind of slacking on that. In real terms, those hoping for a PS5 Pro 2 will turn the CPU limited 30 FPS titles into a super smooth 60 FPS experience will be disappointed. Basically saying we're not going to see some crazy improvements for all the baseline games, said Digital Foundry Richard Ledbetter. With that said, the 3.85 gigahertz mode will bring greater stability to 30 FPS games that may not be hitting their frame rate target with CPU limited. And yes, we have started to see those in titles. And if those 1% impact the GPU performance is verified, that's not really an issue in the age of dynamic resolution scaling. There'll be more an imperceptible reduction in rendering resolution, and that's it. If a game is CPU limited, the GPU will stall and will lose far more performance anyway. Basically saying when it comes to CPU stuff, CPU is going to be an issue regardless. It seems like it's be a bottleneck. And basically, if it was being bottlenecked either way, even if you could go and soak a little bit from the GPU, it's not going to really change too much at the end of the day. So people are somewhat concerned because it's hey, you have a 30 FPS game on your PS5, and you're not going to be able to go play it at 60. It's not going to have a huge instantaneous jump to the 60 FPS, even with better specs. The CPU is not really changing, so that doesn't really change too much on the PS5. And then when it comes to the GPU, it is a better GPU, but at the same time, if the CPU is mediocre, you're still being bottlenecked regardless. So many people are kind of sitting here being like, well, what now? What's going on with that? The biggest difference between the standard PS5 and PS5 Pro is with the GPU that sees rendering 45% faster than the standard PS5. So it's 2 to 3 more times ray tracing, as we've covered up in prior videos. So basically, it is a big jump in the GPU. The GPU is a lot better. The 36 RDNA 2 dual compute units in PlayStation 5 receive a considerable boost, increasing to 30 CUs in the Pro, said Ledbetter, with 33.5 teraflops of computed performance versus the 10.23 teraflops of the standard PS5. The boost here looks incredible. However, these numbers flatter to deceive. AMD's latest GPU architectures, starting with the RDNA 3, feature dual issue FP32, the ability to double operations at the same clock speeds. However, this does not mean that we get double the gaming performance. Indeed, despite the 67% increase to CU count, even factoring out dual issue FP32, Sony itself says in its developer disclosures that the actual throughout boost in gaming applications is around 45%. They're basically saying like some of the stats they're getting, like kind of high level, is that they're going to go and should be a little bit bigger. But basically, PlayStation's saying it for its own developer numbers will be around 45%, which is still a big bump. Like it's some good numbers. They're not fully optimized and fully utilized what they have, but it still seems nice. An increase in compute power alone is only one part of the equation. However, to keep the CUs fed, it's important to increase memory bandwidth. Sony moves from 16 gigabytes of 14 gigabytes GDDR6 in the standard PS5 to 18 gigabytes GDDR6 in the Pro, a 28% increase in bandwidth. So the 444 gigabytes peak of theoretical bandwidth increases to around 576 gigabytes, and all the actual output, though, may be a little bit more enhanced future with better architectural improvements. It's basically also saying, too, as well, there's more computing power, but at the same time, because of them having just better memory and they can technically go and optimize and make the console better, it gives more long-term bonuses. He added, Sony says that depending on the workload, ray tracing performance in the new Pro will be twice as fast as the vanilla unit, but with 3 to 4 time multipliers in some scenarios. So it's basically saying at bare minimum, probably 2x, but if the things are right or it's really well optimized, maybe 3 to 4 times better. Just wanted to point out that this concerns just ray tracing processing, not the frame rate of the actual games. But it's still nice, so it makes the whole experience better. The preference holder says that in practical terms, this means in some games without ray tracing on the basic PS5, you can gain ray tracing features on the Pro. So basically, there is now ray tracing being added to games if they didn't have it before. Another started example is the standard PS5 with ray tracing. Reflections could benefit from ray tracing shadows as well as the PS5 Pro. There's been a conjecture that the PS5 Pro GPU is benefiting from, I hate that they keep on doing an RT where it's ray tracing. Architecture improvements AMD is planning for its upcoming RDN3 for graphics cards. So these enhancements look promising, but it's important to point out that a lot of the boost here will be coming from the fact that the PS5 GPU is much larger than the standard model's GPU. So basically it's coming from both architectural improvements, so basically the console like design itself, and as well just a better console, better GPU Pro as well. So you're gonna have a chance to see that it has a way more memory available for games. Way more memory interface too as well for the bandwidth, which you guys can kind of see just the extra from 576 gigabytes. The memory itself is about the same, but it's just slightly more of a bigger bandwidth. Better clock speed too as well. The CPU is still very, very similar as well, which stinks, but the GPU is a way, way bigger bump as well. So it basically just is slightly better improvements on everything else. Really good GPU, CPU is the same. The PS5 Pro will feature the PS5 as well, super resolution upscaling PSSR solution, which aims to deliver similar results on resolution multipliers as NVIDIA's DLSS. A game internally rendering at 1080p can be upscaled to a convincing looking 4K image in 2 milliseconds. So basically saying 1080p, go to 4K in 2 milliseconds, which is really good, which is the broadly equivalent to a similar task undertaken by AMD's non-ML FSR2 upscaler. The difference is that the quality level should be significantly higher. So basically, it will be upscaling, but the quality will be way nicer. But as always, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So there is some speculation concerning 8K upscaling and 4K at 120 hertz. But it's worth noting that 2 milliseconds of processing time at 120 hertz. Frame has an 8.3 millisecond budget. So basically, I think that means that basically, as long as you can get within that same performance zone, it should be fine. It should be okay. So 60 hertz has 16.7 milliseconds of processing time, and that rises again to 33.3 milliseconds at 30 FPS. Depending on the performance target, that 2 millisecond varies in significance too as well. So PS5 Pro will keep the same 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory as a standard PS5. However, Sony has been able to give an extra 1.2 gigabytes of system memory for developers, as we kind of talked about before as well. Basically saying upscaling should be all good. It's all vibey. Like, it still has a pretty good time buffer to make sure it works. Seems nice. Bearing in mind that the standard PS5 already has enough memory to service a 4K display, you might wonder why the 1.2 gigabytes is necessary. Sony cites that they use the PSSR with this 250 megabyte footprint as one use case, while also pointing out that ray tracing features, particularly the BVH structures used to calculate ray bounces, are also memory intensive. Basically saying like ray tracing is intensive, the overall console is intensive, and PlayStation PSSR is also intensive. Developers can use the memory as they please, but if they max out the 12.5 gigabytes in the standard model without ray tracing, now there's memory available to tap into the Pro. So basically saying if they cannot make the game work with good ray tracing on a normal console, they can kind of have that wiggle room to utilize in the Pro. A lot of folks are assuming it'll be a $599 cost, and also without the detachable disk drive too as well. The final note, higher frame rates, substantially enhanced image quality, and improved ray tracing features, that's what's going to separate the PS5 Pro from the standard model. Assuming there are no further surprises lying in wait, I'd venture to suggest that this is going to be a more niche offering than the PS4 Pro back in the day. Some might even say it's a digital foundry machine, as its forward-looking design delivers the kind of features they like to see in consoles. So basically trying to go and say that the PS5 Pro is cool. It's a good console, but it's going to be a little bit more niche because it's not the biggest updates, but if you really like the idea of 8K, you like the idea of 4K 120 hertz, you like the idea of ray tracing or running your games at the highest quality, then you guys can pick it on up. But I think one of the bigger things is I think a lot of those same people would probably go to PC instead. Kind of like how I went, because you could definitely get a better PC at this point. Probably for more money, though, don't get me wrong, but it's still nice to see. I still think the PS5 is going to be probably big and worthwhile. Let me know if you guys want to get it down below. Check out the Samsung links for their giveaway and their pre-order bonus. That's a hashtag ad. We have the Twitter and Twitch room down below if you guys want to follow. Give me your thoughts on all this type of stuff, or if you guys have any questions, and I appreciate y'all very much for watching here in the first place.